The blue-skinned alien trembled as she watched another transport ship explode in the distance. Chancellor Kiravel pressed her three-fingered hand against the viewing window of her command center, her large purple eyes filling with tears. Another. Thousands of her people were gone, turned to ash in the cold darkness of space. How many more ships have we lost? She asked her aide, though she feared the answer. 47 transport vessels in the last hour, Chancellor. The Vorthik warships are hunting down every evacuation convoy we send out. The younger Zelani's voice shook with fear. They're not even trying to capture prisoners anymore. They're just killing everyone. Kiravel closed her eyes and tried to steady her breathing. The Zelani had been a peaceful people for over 3,000 years. They grew food, created art, and studied the stars. War was something they read about in ancient history books, not something that happened to real people. But the Vorthik Empire had changed all of that in just 2 weeks. The gray-skinned reptilian aliens had come without warning. Their massive black ships had appeared at the edge of Zelani space and immediately began attacking. They destroyed space stations, bombed cities, and hunted down civilian ships like wild animals chasing prey. The Zelani military, what little they had, lasted exactly 6 hours before being completely wiped out. Chancellor, we're receiving another transmission from the outer colonies, her communications officer called out. It's from New Garden World. Kiravel. Heart sank. New Garden World was home to 50 million Zelani, mostly farmers and their families. Put it through. The holographic image of Governor Tamris appeared, his usually calm face streaked with dirt and blood. Behind him, Kiravel could see buildings burning and hear the screams of civilians. Chancellor, they're landing ground troops now. Thousands of them. They're taking prisoners this time, loading our people onto ships like cargo. Tamris ducked as an explosion shook his building. We estimate they've already captured over 10 million civilians. We don't know where they're taking them. The transmission cut to static. Kiravel stared at the empty space where the governor's image had been. 10 million of her people, stolen away to suffer who knows what horrible fate. The Zelani had tried everything they could think of. They sent messages to every species they had contact with, begging for help. Most never responded. Those who did sent polite refusals, saying they couldn't risk war with the Vorthik Empire. Chancellor, her aide whispered, there is one more option. Kiravel looked at him with hope she didn't dare feel. What? The humans. We've only had limited contact with them, but Ambassador Jake Morrison seemed different from the others. Kind, helpful. The Chancellor nodded slowly. The humans were a newly discovered species, found just 6 months ago when one of their trade ships had wandered into Zelani space. They seemed pleasant enough, a bit strange-looking with their pale skin and small eyes, but they had been polite and friendly. They traded some basic goods and shared stories about their homeworld called Earth. What do we know about their military capabilities? Kiravel asked. Her military advisor, General Vextar, shook his head. Very little. They mentioned having some defense forces, but they seemed more interested in talking about farming and art. Their ship was small and appeared to be designed for cargo, not war. Kiravel made her decision. Send a message to the humans. Tell them what's happening. Ask for any help they can provide. Medical supplies, transport ships for refugees, anything. Within an hour, the message was composed and sent across the vast distances of space toward human territory. Kiravel read it one final time before transmission. To our friends, the humans of Earth. This is Chancellor Kiravel of the Zelani Federation. We are under attack by a hostile force calling themselves the Vorthik Empire. They have destroyed our defense forces and are now systematically attacking our civilian populations. Millions of our people have been killed or captured. We are facing complete extinction. We know we have not known each other long, but we respectfully request any assistance you can provide. Medical supplies, refugee transport vessels, anything you can spare would be gratefully received. We understand if you cannot help us. We would not ask others to risk their own people for our sake. But if there is anything at all you can do, please help us. Time is running out. With desperate hope, Chancellor Kiravel. The message shot through space at faster than light speed, carrying with it the hopes of an entire civilization. 3 days later, Jake Morrison sat in his quarters aboard the human diplomatic vessel UES Herald, reading the Zelani message for the 10th time. The 35-year-old ambassador felt his stomach twist with anger as he read about the attacks on civilians. "Damn," he muttered, reaching for his communication device. "Bridge, this is Ambassador Morrison. I need to speak with Admiral Kane immediately. Priority 1. Within minutes, Admiral Lisa Kane's stern face appeared on his screen. The 50-year-old fleet commander had spent her entire adult life in the Earth Defense Force, and Jake could see the cold fury in her dark eyes as she listened to him read the Zelani message. "How long to reach their space?" Kane asked when he finished. 4 days at maximum speed with the Herald, but Admiral, we're just a diplomatic ship. We can't, you won't be going alone, Ambassador. Kane's voice was deadly calm. I'm mobilizing the 7th Fleet. We'll meet you at the rendezvous point in 12 hours. Jake blinked in surprise. The entire 7th Fleet? Admiral, the Zelani are expecting maybe a few cargo ships with medical supplies. They don't even know we have a real military. Admiral Kane smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. Then they're about to learn something new about humans. We don't let our friends get slaughtered by alien monsters. Not on our watch. The transmission ended, leaving Jake staring at the blank screen. He thought about the gentle, artistic Zelani, who had shared poems and songs with him during his diplomatic visit. They had no idea what they had just unleashed. Captain Ryan Phillips stood on the bridge of the U.S. Defender, watching the tactical display with growing anger. The intelligence reports coming in from Zelani space painted a picture of complete brutality. The Vorthok weren't just conquering. They were destroying everything in their path. Sir, we're getting more intercepted communications from the Vorthok fleet, his communications officer reported. They're calling the Zelani grass eaters and weak prey. They seem to think this is some kind of hunting expedition. Ryan's jaw tightened. The 38-year-old captain had seen his share of conflicts, but attacking peaceful civilians was something that made his blood boil. Any word on their fleet strength? Approximately 300 warships, sir. They're using basic plasma weapons and kinetic projectiles. Their technology appears to be about 200 years behind our current standards. Ryan nodded grimly. The Vorthok might outnumber any single human fleet, but they had no idea what they were about to face. What's our status on the fleet assembly? Commander Amy Torres looked up from her station. Admiral Kane reports that the 7th Fleet will be ready to move out in 8 hours. Admiral Carter's home defense units are already en route from the Sol system, Ryan whistled softly. If Nick Carter was bringing ships from Earth's home defense, this was being treated as a major operation. How many ships total? Current count is 412 vessels, sir. 17 dreadnoughts, 34 heavy cruisers, 48 destroyers, and full support elements. The Marines are loading onto the assault carriers as we speak. The bridge fell silent. Even Ryan, who had served in the Earth Defense Force for 15 years, had never seen a fleet that large assembled for a single mission. The Zelani were expecting maybe a dozen cargo ships with medical supplies. Instead, they were getting the largest human military force ever deployed outside of the Sol system. Sir, his tactical officer called out, Lieutenant Colonel Williams is requesting permission to brief you on the Marine deployment. Put her through. The holographic image of Beth Williams appeared on the bridge. The tough 42-year-old Marine had scars on her face from the colony wars and eyes that had seen too much combat. Captain Phillips, I wanted to update you on our ground force preparations. Go ahead, Colonel. We're loading the 3rd Marine Expeditionary Force, 20,000 troops with full combat gear. We've also got the Rapid Response Battalions and the Special Operations Units. If the Vorthek have ground forces on those planets, we'll be ready to deal with them. Ryan frowned. Colonel, the Zolani asked for medical aid and refugee transport. Are we sure we need that level of firepower? William's expression hardened. Sir, intelligence reports suggest the Vorthek have captured over 15 million Zolani civilians. They're not just conquering planets, they're taking slaves. In my experience, the only way to deal with slavers is to hit them so hard they never think about doing it again. Before Ryan could respond, another voice joined the conversation. The Colonel is right. Dr. Alex Stone's face appeared in a split screen next to William's. The young scientist looked tired but determined. I've been analyzing the intercepted Vorthek communications. Their language patterns suggest they view other species as either predators or prey. They literally cannot understand the concept of equals. What does that mean for our mission? Ryan asked. It means they'll only respect overwhelming force, Dr. Stone continued. They're not going to negotiate or compromise. They'll keep hunting and killing until someone proves they're the bigger predator. Admiral Kane's voice suddenly came over the ship's communication system. All vessels, this is Admiral Kane. We have received confirmation that the Vorthek have begun harvesting operations on 3 more Zolani worlds. They are loading civilian populations onto slave ships. Our mission parameters have changed. This is no longer just a rescue operation. This is a complete military intervention. Ryan felt the familiar pre-battle tension settle over the bridge. Crew, Admiral, what are our new orders? Simple, Captain. We're going to destroy every Vorthek ship in Zolani space. We're going to rescue every captured civilian we can find. And we're going to make sure the Vorthek Empire understands that attacking peaceful species has consequences. Commander Torres looked up from her station. Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the Zolani Chancellor. She's asking for an update on our assistance. Ryan thought about the gentle aliens who grew flowers and wrote poetry. They had no idea what was coming. Put me through to Chancellor Kiravel. The blue-skinned alien's face appeared on the main screen. She looked exhausted and frightened, her large purple eyes filled with desperate hope. Captain Phillips, she said, her voice shaking. Thank you for responding to our call. We know it's a great risk for your people to help us. How many supply ships are you sending? Ryan chose his words carefully. Chancellor, we're sending more than supplies. We're sending everything we have. Everything? She asked, confused. But Captain, we don't want to impose. A few medical ships would be wonderful. Maybe some transport vessels to help evacuate civilians. Chancellor, Ryan said gently, we've analyzed the situation. The Vorthek aren't going to stop until they're forced to stop. We're bringing enough force to end this threat permanently. Kiravel looked puzzled. Force? But Captain, your people are traders and farmers. Surely you don't have military ships? Ryan almost smiled at her innocence. Chancellor, humans have learned that sometimes the only way to protect farmers and traders is to have very good soldiers. Our fleet will arrive in your space within 48 hours. Your fleet? The Chancellor's voice was small. How many ships? Enough, Ryan said simply. More than enough. After the transmission ended, Commander Torres shook her head. Those poor aliens have no idea what they've asked for. No, Ryan agreed, watching the tactical display show more human ships arriving at the assembly point every hour. They asked for help. They're going to get justice. In the distance, the massive human fleet continued to grow, each ship loaded with enough firepower to level continents. The Zolani had called for assistance, but what they were getting was something the galaxy had never seen before, the full military might of humanity unleashed in defense of the innocent. The Vorthek Empire was about to learn why humans had become the dominant species on a world where everything tried to kill them. Chancellor Kiravel was reviewing evacuation reports when her aide burst into the command center, his face pale with shock. "Chancellor, you need to see this immediately. Something is happening at the edge of our system." Kiravel looked up from her data pad, hope flickering in her tired eyes. "Is it the human supply ships?" I don't know what it is," the aide stammered, pointing to the main display screen. "The sensors are showing massive energy signatures appearing out of hyperspace." The large viewing screen activated, showing the outer edge of the Zelani home system. At first, there was nothing but empty space and distant stars. Then, like a miracle, ships began to appear, but these weren't the small cargo vessels Kiravel had expected. The first ship to emerge from hyperspace was enormous, a massive, gray wedge covered in weapon ports and armor plating. It was easily 10 times larger than the biggest Zelani civilian transport. Before Kiravel could process what she was seeing, more ships appeared, dozens of them, then hundreds. "By the ancient gardens," whispered General Vextar, staring at the display in amazement. "What are those?" The human fleet spread out in perfect formation, each ship taking its assigned position with military precision. Sleek destroyers moved into screening positions while massive dreadnoughts held the center of the formation. Fighter carriers launched clouds of small, fast-moving ships that began patrol patterns around the fleet. "Chancellor," her communications officer called out, his voice shaking. "We're receiving a transmission from the lead human vessel. It's identifying itself as the UES Vengeance." "Put it through," Kiravel said. Though she could barely speak, the face that appeared on the screen belonged to a middle-aged human woman with short gray hair and steel-cold eyes. She wore a dark blue uniform covered in medals and insignia. "Chancellor." "Kiravel, this is Admiral Lisa Kane of the Earth Defense Force. We received your call for assistance." Kiravel stared at the human in confusion. "Admiral, but we asked for medical supplies, refugee transport. We didn't ask for this." Admiral Kane's expression softened slightly. "Chancellor, when humans receive a distress call from friends who are being attacked by slavers and murderers, we don't send cargo ships. We send everything we have." "Everything?" Kiravel looked at the tactical display showing hundreds of human warships. "How many ships do you have?" 412 vessels, Chancellor, plus support craft. We're here to end the Vorthik threat permanently." The command center fell silent. 400 ships. The entire Zelani military at its peak had consisted of maybe 30 patrol boats and a few defensive platforms. These humans had brought a fleet larger than anything the Zelani had ever imagined. "Admiral," Kiravel said carefully, "we're grateful for your help, but we never asked you to fight a war for us. We don't want your people to die for our sake." Admiral Kane's smile was cold and dangerous. "Chancellor, when someone attacks our friends, it becomes our war too. The Vorthak made it personal when they started hunting civilians." Captain Sarah Lopez's face appeared in a smaller window next to the Admiral. "Chancellor, we're deploying emergency relief teams to your refugee centers immediately. Our engineering corps can construct temporary cities for displaced civilians within days." "Cities?" Kiravel asked weakly. "Fully functional settlements with power, water, medical facilities, and housing for up to 1 million people each," Lopez explained as if it was the most normal thing in the world. "We brought everything needed for large-scale refugee operations." On another part of the display, Kiravel watched in amazement as human ships began launching smaller craft. But these weren't the gentle medical transports she had expected. They were angular, heavily armed fighters that moved through space like deadly insects. Commander Tony Garcia's voice came over the communication system. "All squadrons begin reconnaissance sweeps of Vorthik positions. Rules of engagement are: Weapons free on any hostile contacts. Weapons free? General Vextair whispered. They're actually going to attack? As if hearing him, dozens of human fighters streaked past the viewing ports of the command center, their engines leaving blue trails in the darkness. Each small ship was sleek and predatory, designed for one purpose, killing enemy vessels. Admiral Kane noticed the Zilani's shocked expressions. Chancellor, I think there's been a misunderstanding about what humans are capable of. We're not just traders and farmers. But your ambassador, Jake Morrison, he seemed so peaceful, Kiravel protested. Jake is peaceful, Kane agreed. Most humans prefer peace. But we've learned that if you want peace, you have to be prepared for war. We've been preparing for a very long time. Suddenly, alarms began sounding throughout the Zilani command center. Chancellor, the sensor operator, called out urgently. We're detecting Vorthak ships approaching from the outer planets. At least 50 vessels, moving in attack formation. Kiravel felt her heart sink. 50 Vorthak warships would be more than enough to destroy what remained of her fleet and finish off her people. She turned to Admiral Kane with tears in her eyes. Admiral, I'm sorry we've brought this down on your people. You should retreat while you still can. Admiral Kane's laugh was sharp and without humor. Retreat? Chancellor, 50 ships? We brought 400 because we wanted to make sure we had enough firepower to handle their entire fleet. 50 ships isn't a threat. It's target practice. Major. Chris Bennett's voice came over the tactical channel. Admiral, orbital defense platforms are deploying around all inhabited worlds. Each platform is armed with enough firepower to defend an entire star system. Orbital platforms? Kiravel asked. Faintly. Automated defense stations, Kane explained. We dropped them off while we were talking. Your worlds are now under the protection of Earth Defense Force systems. Nothing gets through without our permission. On the main display, the approaching Vorthak ships appeared as red dots moving toward the human fleet. To Kiravel, it looked like a substantial force. To the humans, it appeared to be barely worth their attention. All ships, Admiral Kane announced calmly. We have incoming hostiles. This will be our first demonstration to the Vorthak Empire of what happens when they attack peaceful species. Make it memorable. The human fleet began to move, turning toward the approaching enemy with the smooth coordination of a pack of predators. Kiravel watched in fascination and terror as humanity revealed its true nature. These weren't gentle traders who happened to have a few military ships. These were warriors from a world that had forged them into perfect killers, and they had come to her system with enough firepower to burn entire worlds to ash. The Vorthak had no idea what was about to hit them. Fleet Commander Grixtel of the Vorthak Empire stood on the bridge of his flagship, the bloody claw staring at the sensor readings with growing confusion. His reptilian features twisted into a snarl as he tried to understand what he was seeing. What? Are those ships? He hissed at his tactical officer. They're not Zilani vessels. Unknown Fleet Commander. They appeared without warning and are broadcasting identification signals, claiming to be from something called Earth Defense Force. The energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases. Grixtel's yellow eyes narrowed. The Vorthak had conquered dozens of species over the centuries. They were experts at reading military strength, and they had never encountered anything they couldn't defeat through superior numbers and ruthless tactics. How many ships? Over 400, sir. But they appear to be from a prey species. The intercepted communication suggests they're here to provide humanitarian aid to the grass eaters. Grixtel laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the bridge. 400 ships to deliver medical supplies? These aliens must be even more cowardly than the Zilani. Prepare for attack. We'll destroy their fleet and add their people to our slave pens. But as the Vorthak ships moved closer, something strange happened. The human fleet didn't scatter or try to retreat like every other species they had encountered. Instead, they Ships formed up in perfect battle formation and began moving toward them. "Sir," the sensor operator called out nervously, "the alien ships are targeting us with weapons we don't recognize. Energy readings are, sir, they're off the scale." Admiral Kane watched the approaching Vorthic fleet with cold satisfaction. "All ships, this is Admiral Kane. We have 50 enemy vessels approaching. Rules of engagement are weapons-free. Show them what happens when they hunt peaceful species." Captain Dan Murphy of the U.S. Retribution was the first to open fire. His ship's main particle beam array lit up space with brilliant blue energy. The beam struck the lead Vorthak cruiser and cut through its armor like it was made of paper. The alien ship exploded in a massive fireball that lit up the darkness. "Direct hit," Murphy reported calmly. "Target destroyed." Within seconds, the entire human fleet opened fire. Beams of pure energy lanced across space, each one powerful enough to vaporize a city block. The Vorthic plasma cannons returned fire, but their primitive weapons barely scratched the human ships. Energy shields. Grixtel watched in horror as his fleet was torn apart. "Impossible! Our weapons aren't even damaging them." "Fleet Commander," his weapons officer reported in panic, "their shields are absorbing everything we throw at them. Our plasma cannons might as well be throwing rocks." 3 more Vorthic ships exploded as human destroyers targeted them with precision fire. The aliens had never faced anything like this. Their empire had been built on attacking weaker species with inferior technology. Now they were facing an enemy that was centuries ahead of them in every way. "All ships retreat," Grixtel ordered. "Fall back to the outer system." But the human ships were faster, much faster. The Vorthek vessels were designed for intimidation and brute force, not speed or maneuverability. The human ships moved like hunting cats, cutting off escape routes. And surrounding the alien fleet, Commander Tony Garcia led his fighter squadrons into the battle, and the Vorthek got their first look at human small craft tactics. Each fighter was barely larger than a shuttle, but they moved with impossible speed and coordination. They swarmed around the massive Vorthik battleships like angry insects, their weapons systematically destroying engines and weapon systems. "Sir, the small craft are disabling our ships instead of destroying them," the tactical officer reported. "They're targeting specific systems." Grixtel didn't understand. "In Vorthik culture, you killed your enemies or enslaved them. You didn't disable their ships unless you wanted to capture them. What do they want?" His question was answered when human marine assault ships began docking with the disabled Vorthak vessels. What happened next shocked the alien commander even. More than the battle itself, Colonel Beth Williams led the first wave of Marines onto a captured Vorthik ship. The aliens expected the humans to behave like conquerors, to kill the crew and take the ship as a prize. Instead, the humans were focused on something else entirely. "Search every compartment," Williams ordered her troops. "Find the prisoners. The intelligence reports say they're keeping captured Zilani on their ships." The Marines moved through the alien vessel with deadly efficiency. They had trained for ship-to-ship combat in environments that would kill most species, and the Vorthek ship's corridors felt spacious and comfortable compared to the cramped conditions they were used to. They found the prisoners in the ships. Cargo hold, hundreds of Zilani civilians crammed into metal cages like animals. The blue-skinned aliens were terrified and malnourished, but alive. "Medical teams to Cargo Bay 3, Williams called over her radio. "We've got civilians who need immediate attention." The rescued Zilani couldn't believe what they were seeing. The humans moved with military precision, but their first priority was treating the wounded and getting everyone to safety. They had medicine, food, and warm blankets ready before the prisoners were even fully freed from their cages. Back on the bridge of the Bloody Claw, Grixtel realized his fleet was finished. In less than 30 minutes, the humans had destroyed or disabled every ship in his task force. His mighty fleet, which had conquered entire star systems, had been swept aside like dust. Fleet Commander, his communications officer called out. We're receiving a transmission from the human fleet. Admiral Kane's face appeared on the screen, her expression hard as stone. Vorthek Commander, this is Admiral Kane of the Earth Defense Force. Your ships are disabled and your crews are prisoners. But we're not interested in conquest. We want your prisoners back, and we want you to deliver a message to your empire. Grixtel tried to maintain his dignity even in defeat. What message, human? Tell your leaders that Earth has taken the Zilani Federation under our protection. Any further attacks on them will be considered acts of war against humanity. We've located your fleet bases in this sector, and we're prepared to visit each one personally if necessary. The transmission ended, leaving Grixtel staring at a blank screen. His empire had built its power on the fear of weaker species. But now they had encountered something that didn't fear them at all. Lieutenant Jenny Ross coordinated the rescue operations from her command ship, efficiently managing the evacuation of thousands of Zilani prisoners while simultaneously directing the capture of Vorthek vessels. The humans made it look effortless, combining overwhelming military force with precise humanitarian operations. As the last of the rescued civilians were transferred to human medical ships, Admiral Kane opened a channel to Chancellor Kiravel. Chancellor, we've recovered approximately 15,000 of your people from the Vorthek ships. They're being treated by our medical teams and will be returned to you shortly. Kiravel's voice was filled with amazement and gratitude. Admiral, how is this possible? You destroyed their entire fleet in minutes. Chancellor, Kane replied, this wasn't their entire fleet. This was just a raiding party. But don't worry, we're about to pay a visit to their main bases. The Vorthek Empire is going to learn that some prey species bite back. 2 weeks after the battle in Zilani space, Emperor Vrykthul of the Vorthek Empire sat in his throne room, reading reports that made his blood run cold. His mighty fleet, the terror of dozens of star systems, had been completely destroyed by an unknown species calling themselves humans. How many ships did we lose? He asked his military advisor, though he already knew the answer would be devastating. All of them, my emperor. 300 warships completely destroyed or captured. The humans didn't just defeat our forces. They hunted down every single vessel that tried to escape. Vrykthul's claws dug into the armrests of his throne. The Vorthek Empire had ruled through fear for centuries. They were the apex predators of their region of space, and no species had ever dared to fight back effectively. Now suddenly, they had encountered something that made them look like helpless prey. What do we know about these humans? Very little, my emperor. They appear to come from a single world called Earth. Intelligence suggests their entire species originated from one planet, yet they field the most advanced military we've ever encountered. Before the emperor could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the palace. His communications officer ran into the throne room, his face pale with terror. My emperor, we're detecting massive energy signatures at the edge of our home system. Ships are dropping out of hyperspace. How many ships? Vrykthul demanded. We can't get an accurate count, sir. Our sensors are showing over 600 vessels. The emperor felt fear for the first time in his long life. 600 ships. The humans had brought an even larger fleet to his homeworld than they had used to destroy his invasion force. On the bridge of the U.E.'s Vengeance, Admiral Kane studied the tactical display showing the Vorthek home system. The planet below was heavily fortified, with orbital defense platforms and military bases scattered across multiple moons. Admiral, Captain Phillips reported from the Defender, we're detecting approximately 200 defense platforms and at least 50 military installations. The planet appears to be one giant fortress. Kane nodded grimly. That's what happens when you build an empire on conquest and slavery. You spend all your time preparing to defend what you've stolen. Captain Sarah Lopez joined the conversation from her command ship. Admiral, we've completed our scan of the prison facilities. There are over 3 million sentient beings held as slaves on the surface. Representatives from at least 20 different species. 3 million, Kane repeated quietly. The number was staggering. The Vorthik hadn't just been raiding the Zilani. They had been systematically enslaving entire populations across their empire. Commander Pete Davis's intelligence division had been working around the clock since their arrival. Admiral, we've identified the primary slave processing centers and the locations of the ruling class. The Emperor's palace is heavily shielded, but not against our penetrator weapons. Kane made her decision. All ships, this is Admiral Kane. We're not here to conquer the Vorthik Empire. We're here to end it. Primary targets are all military installations and government centers. Secondary targets are the slave processing facilities, but be careful. We want those prisoners alive. The human fleet moved into attack position with the same deadly precision they had shown at Zilani space. But this time, they weren't just fighting a raiding fleet. They were dismantling an entire empire. Captain Dan Murphy led the first wave of attacks against the orbital defense platforms. The Vorthik weapons were the same primitive plasma cannons they had used before, and they were just as ineffective against human shields. Within minutes, the platforms were reduced to glowing debris. On the surface, Emperor Vrykthul watched his mighty defenses crumble like paper. How are they doing this? He screamed at his advisors. Our platforms should be able to destroy any fleet. My Emperor, his military advisor said weakly, their technology is beyond anything we've seen. Our weapons can't even damage their shields. Colonel Beth Williams led the marine assault on the planet's surface. Her dropships landed near the largest slave compound, and her troops immediately began securing the area. What they found there would haunt them for years. The prisoners were kept in conditions that were barely suitable for animals. Beings from dozens of different species were crammed into overcrowded cells, fed just enough to keep them alive, and worked until they collapsed from exhaustion. Medical teams, get down here now, Williams called over her radio. We're going to need every doctor we have. The rescued slaves couldn't believe what was happening. They had given up hope of ever seeing freedom again, and now strange, pale-skinned aliens were freeing them and providing medical care. Dr. Alex Stone had come down to the planet to help coordinate the rescue operations. As he moved through the prison compounds, he was amazed by the diversity of the captured species. There were plant-like beings who communicated through scent, crystal creatures who sang in harmonious tones, and dozens of others he had never seen before. Colonel, he called to Williams, we're going to need to contact the home governments of all these species. Some of them have been missing for decades. Meanwhile, the destruction of the Vorthik military continued. Major Chris Bennett's orbital bombardment system systematically destroyed every military base, weapons factory, and government building on the planet. The humans were precise. They targeted only military and government installations, leaving civilian areas untouched. Emperor Vrykthul realized his empire was finished when human troops breached his palace. He expected to be executed immediately, as was the Vorthak custom when overthrowing an enemy leader. Instead, Admiral Kane walked into his throne room flanked by 2 Marines, her expression cold but controlled. Emperor Vrykthul, she said, you are under arrest for crimes against sentient life. You will be tried by a tribunal representing all the species your empire has enslaved. You dare take me prisoner? Vrykthul snarled. I am the ruler of a mighty empire. Kane looked around the ruined throne room, where debris was still falling from the bombed ceiling. Your empire no longer exists. It took us exactly 4 hours to destroy your entire military and free your slaves. Your mighty empire was nothing more than a collection of bullies picking on people who couldn't fight back. Over the following days, the human fleet worked tirelessly to return the freed slaves to their homeworlds. Ships that had been designed for war became rescue vessels, carrying grateful refugees back to families they thought they would never see again. Chancellor Kiravel arrived with a Zilani delegation to witness the end of the Vorthek Empire. She found Admiral Kane in the temporary command center they had set up on the planet's surface. "Admiral," she said quietly, "I wanted to thank you personally. When we sent that message asking for help, we never imagined." Kane smiled, and for the first time since the crisis began, it was a warm expression. "Chancellor, when someone asks Earth for help, we don't do things halfway. Your people are safe now, and they'll stay safe. But Admiral, your people have taken such risks for us. You've traveled so far from your home, fought such dangerous battles." "Chancellor," Kane interrupted gently, "that's what friends do. We protect each other." As the human fleet prepared to leave the former Vorthak system, word had already spread throughout the galaxy. Humanity had announced itself as a major power, but not through conquest or threats. They had done it by protecting the innocent and freeing the enslaved. Captain Phillips sent a final message to Earth Command. Mission accomplished. The Vorthek Empire has been dismantled. 3 million slaves have been freed and returned to their homes, and the Zilani Federation is secure. Recommend we establish permanent patrol bases in this sector to prevent similar threats. The response from Earth was immediate. "Well done, Admiral Kane. Welcome to humanity's new role as guardians of the peace." The galaxy had learned an important lesson. There was now a species that wouldn't tolerate the strong preying on the weak. Humanity had taken its place as the protector of the innocent, backed by fleets powerful enough to enforce that protection across the stars. The Zilani had asked for assistance. They had received something far more valuable. They had gained friends who would never let them face danger alone again.